What's up, guys? It's LTE with Low Tech. This is a quick review of the Alcatel Pop 7 LTE. This is the newest version of Alcatel 7-inch low-budget Pop 7 line. The last model came out a year or two ago. This new model is very much the same in a lot of ways. They're both 7-inch devices. This is a dual-core device. It contains a Snapdragon 210, which isn't stated anywhere on the specification sheet. So it's Snapdragon 210. So very, very bottom of the totem pole on the Qualcomm series, but overall the device does handle pretty well even with that. It is all plastic, like you expect. This is a $130, $140 device. Does have LTE for T-Mobile, but for the most part, it is a pretty functioning tablet with some pretty big caveats. So let's go ahead and take a look. Like I said, it does have a all plastic bezel. The screen is glass; it's not plastic, so that's at least nice. Haven't scratched it in our time during our review process. Overall, the device feels pretty nice in the hand. This plastic here ring on the edge is a little bit rounded. It lets you have a nice grip to it. It points in a little bit more than it does point out, so you do get a nice solid grip on the device. Though everything else is pretty much what you'd expect. Over here, you can actually insert the SD card and the SIM chip, which at least the SIM card. It's not necessarily mandatory. The micro SD pretty much is, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later in the review. But overall, from a design standpoint, from a build quality standpoint, it feels pretty good. I don't think I'm going to break this tablet. It would be something I would be very comfortable handing to a child and not worrying that they're going to damage it. And it's only $130. It's not like I'm going to break the bank if I have to buy another one. The display is 7 inches. It's 1024 by 600. For the device's size, it is acceptable for that resolution. 720p would have been, much appreciated because some applications don't really like working at 600p or lower anymore. At least for things like doing remote desktop, things like that, it's a little low to do those kind of applications, but it does work. The biggest problem with the display is not the resolution, it's actually the viewing angles. The colors on the device are on the screen are actually pretty nice, but if you can get us in the camera, it is pretty terrible viewing angles, at least vertically here, which in a device this size, you're probably going to be using more this way than any way else. From the side, it's not quite as bad, but it's not much better. But yeah, when it pretty much fades completely to black here in the bottom of the screen, or when you tilt it up, it's not necessarily a good thing, and it fades completely white the other way. So the screen is probably the biggest disappointment on this device. Everything else you can kind of deal with, but if you really want to go and test this device in person in a T-Mobile store, see if you actually want to use it in terms of the screen, because it's not going to be for everybody. It's very frustrating when you're playing a game this way and you turn it sideways here, and then the screen goes black, and you go here, the screen goes white, and you have to really play a perfect angle, especially since your eyes are not in the same location. They're in two separate places. So one of them might see a black screen, one of them might see a perfect screen, and it really starts messing with you. That being said, the performance of the device, is actually pretty good. So we loaded up Minecraft, we loaded up also Minecraft Story Mode, and even though the specifications of the device are pretty low, the results from Antutu and all things like that are pretty poor. For the most part, the performance was very sufficient for playing games like this. Obviously not the smoothest we've seen, but it is playable. The low resolution is really to thank for that. If this was at a higher resolution, this would never be playable on a device of this specifications. But you do see a little bit of skipping. But nobody's going to buy this tablet to be their gaming tablet. So in a pinch, it would play most of the games you're willing to play. When it's not raining, it actually performs a little bit better in the game, not outside in the real world. The cameras on the device are pretty much crap. Very much how we actually tested on the Chewy tablet recently. They're both 720p, although this one actually says it can take 5 megapixel pictures, at least on the back one. It it's not good quality. Everything's going to be, pretty fuzzy. Everything looks pretty bad. It doesn't look any better than the 2 megapixel cameras or 1.9 megapixel cameras that were on the Chewy tablet. So again, you shouldn't be taking pictures of tablets anyway, but it doesn't actually work very well at all for picture taking. It does work okay in terms of video conferencing. You actually can see, a pretty good amount of detail in it, but it's not necessarily something I would want to use much for that either. Continuing with the cheap tablet disappointment checklist, the speaker on this device is pretty small, pretty tiny. So the sound of the device is a little on the tinny side. It does get more volume than you do get in the Chewy tablet, but overall, it's not going to be something you're going to be listening to for long periods of time. Obviously, you can still hear me over this. It's not like it's overpowering me or anything like that. So it's definitely serviceable. It is only a mono speaker, but overall, it's what I would say adequate. It's nothing that would blow me away, and it's definitely not a selling feature of the device. Another one of the downsides with the device is the very small amount of internal storage. It does have a gigabyte of RAM, which is fine for most things. You're not going to actually worry about that too much, but it only has 4 gigabytes of internal storage, which means that pretty much out of the box, you're down to like 1 gig, and then Android starts really complaining after you get down to like 250 megabytes. So you only have like 750 megabytes. So there's not that much installed on the device, and we don't have much storage space here. You can see that. However, one of the best selling points of the device is that it runs Android Marshmallow, which is really a necessity for this tablet because Android Marshmallow lets you use your SD card as normal storage. So this is a $129 device, but you really need to input some money in and get an SD card. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can get 8 gigabytes, and that'd probably be enough for the rest for most people, since this is not necessarily a high-performing, high-functioning device. But I put a 64 gigabyte card in here. It works just fine, and I've loaded some games on here, and they install just fine. Obviously, the write speed is going to be a little lower than what you would get inside of the internal storage, but it is nice that they at least thought to put Marshmallow on here, because without it, you would really be stuck with this small amount of storage. We tried to install 2 games at the same time. We tried to install Minecraft Story Mode at the same time, and yeah, it would not let us install both because it ran out of memory before it actually could install both. So neither of those games are really huge, but if you do play a lot of video games, you're going to make sure that you do get the extra SD card, and really anybody should be getting one for this device. It's going to be a pretty costly investment on such a cheap tablet, just because the percentage-wise, $25 is about 20% of the whole price. One thing to be aware of is make sure you do get a fast SD card. If it's not fast enough, it actually won't work as an internal storage replacement. So make sure you're getting something like at least class 10 or UHS-1 or whatever it is, and to make sure that you aren't going to be limited to just a storage medium. You're going to be using it as you can actually use it as an internal storage replacement. The battery life on this device is actually pretty good. You're going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 hours, 9 hours of actual usage out of it, depending on what you're doing and how you have the brightness turned up. Standby is actually really good if you have nothing running in the background. You could easily get well over a week or something like that. This is not one of the type of tablets you're going to come back 3 days later and find it dead. It will keep going, which is really good, especially since it does have a SIM card slot. So you could technically keep this running entirely off of the SIM card, never actually use Wi-Fi. So if there is one thing that's really good about this device for the price, it is the battery life. Not quite as good as what you'd get inside of the Lenovo A10, but for $129 or so, it is probably one of the longest ones you can get for the price. And that's really to thank with the small screen, the low resolution, the slow chipset. Overall, it's a pretty handy little device, especially if you do need something that can really go on to your cell phone plan and get LTE right off of it, and you don't want to tether from your phone or something like that. And there aren't that many options, and for limited things, it actually is a pretty good deal. Especially since if you're using it for reading books, things like that, I probably wouldn't recommend it because the screen is pretty terrible for that. Playing games, the screen's pretty terrible for that. But if you are going to be just using it, to check your email, things like that, things where you're using it for limited times, over the course of several days, something like that, it is a really good device, and you can get the 250 megabytes from T-Mobile and use that as just your main way to get your email, things like that. So, there are some selling points to this device, but for most people, you would want to stay away just because the screen is just so bad on this device. It is really reminiscent to what things you would get out of China like several years ago. You're just not going to have a very good experience doing a lot of things over an extended period of time. Thanks for watching, guys. This is LOH Low Tech, and this is the Alcatel Pop 7 LTE with T-Mobile. Subscribe.